Today we're talking about memorial. And you'll remember Joshua said take 12 stones. Now these weren't little stones. These were, put them on your shoulder and take them in the Jordan and stack them up so that this will be a memorial that you can tell your children about what has happened here. If you look it up in a dictionary, it tells us that a memorial is something, especially a structure, and that would be a monument, 9/11, a monument, established to remind people of a person or an event. A memorial. Carrie, what are you doing down there? You thought you were going to get away with that? Okay. First of all, let's talk about some examples of memorials. I'm supposed to watch that here. Messing up. Carrie grabbed the wrong mic.
Carrie grabbed the wrong one? You want me to get that one?
Mic. We're dumping all the mics this week, by the way. It's going to be very costly because of this thing they're doing is wiping us out. So it's not us, it's whoever handles the... You do know what? Are you on?
Yeah, it was auctioned off and bought by a big corporation. So, go on.
Is she going to be able to be heard?
Okay. Oh, there I am. Yay.
Okay, tell us that story. They don't realize we're not messing up. Tell them what happened.
So the federal government auctioned off the 600 megahertz wavelength, and it was bought for several billion, with a B, dollars, and they're taking over the waves, and that's why. Okay. We have to get off the 600. Almost all of these things are 600.
Great.
Yep.
It was a good idea when we bought them, but anyway.
Yep, that was before the auction.
Okay, so a memorial is something, especially a structure which would be called a monument, established to remind us of some person or some event. So what are some examples of memorials that we have in our lives, in our personal lives? One of those would be a snow globe. And you go somewhere. Now, I can't relate to this because I don't travel. But some people travel and they collect.
Not just don't travel. Don't like to travel. Don't want to travel, which that's just odd. I'm sorry, I can't stand it. Whatever.
Now, in Texas, maybe, but not beyond. Right? But, people will go places and they'll get a snow globe and shake it up and here, look, I was in Seattle or I was in France or what do you do?
I buy an ornament everywhere I go that has the name of the place I've been, and then every Christmas I put up the ornaments of the places I've been because I want to go back. I want to go more places.
Yeah. So when you go, my wife is going, where are y'all going? Germany or France? You're going where I was born. Aren't you going where I was born?
She's going to Luxembourg.
Oh. Well, anyway, I just told her, find a friend, pay their way, because I'm not going, whatever. Anyway, I have no desire to get in a plane and fly. Anyway, okay, so when you have these ornaments,
yes,
you're basically stacking up 12 stones and remembering. You have a globe, you're doing that. Here is a memorial, right? Now, a memorial is something you believe. What?
Well, I hope the marriage is not over with. Yeah.
That's why you're not part of the sermon. Okay. Memorials are also about what we believe. It's something we have given belief to. We empower a memorial. In other words, if it's a snow globe, that was significant to me. I'm empowering it. It has meaning. I want to remember it. This has power. It is a memory. It is a memorial. It is a present reminder of something I am, a love, a commitment, an eternal bond that exists, you know, between two people. It's something I believe in, and I give it power. This is important to understand. I empower it. I give it power in my life. So let's look at the church. There are things in the church that we empower, right? And we give power to. And they're not just in the past, they're in the present. What's a big one that's right behind me? The cross, yes. And it establishes our belief. We put belief into it. We empower it. It speaks to our lives. And my cousin, who's a speaker and psychologist, a teacher, said, don't use the word live into it, because you won't understand it. Y'all know what that means, don't you? Live into, in other words, this states who I am. That I am loved of God, that my sins are forgiven. So I want to live into that truth. I give that power. I live into it. And I live out of it. You know, I move forward in the day with that truth. But don't we got stained glass windows. Oh, they're on. That
yes,
was
they're
another
on.
problem. Thank you. Two of them went out, and one of them, that's another story. But anyway, the stained glass windows are memorials, and sometimes literally memorials to someone, but they definitely are memories, remembrances. When we remember something, we remember it, we put it back together again, we relive it, we empower it. But there's also something we want to talk about, and that is, you know that a lot of things that are memorials for you, I've got some memorials we talk about that are trophies.
Right.
And I look at them, they really depress me now. Because, I mean, they were trophies that I won when I was, in college. And I'm not that anymore. And I think I put them away. I don't even like to look at them. But I did that. But most of the memorials we have, we didn't do. You do realize that, don't you? Most of the things you believe in and you live out of and you empower, we don't do them. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. Let's look at that one. That story is a lie. Joshua didn't fight a battle for Jericho. What did he do?
He walked.
He obeyed. He just walked around that edifice. How many times?
He had a parade. 6 days, one time around. 7th day, 7 times around.
You young people can remember that stuff. But anyway, and what happened? The walls came tumbling down. It was just there for him. Did I do anything to make it? No. That's a memorial I just walked into. I mean, it was available for me. So we want to make clear about some memorials that happen to you, actually, and most of these you're not even aware of, not unless you've gone through some serious counseling, introspection, and what are they called?
Strongholds.
Strongholds. Tell us about strongholds.
So strongholds are those things that we have allowed to speak to our life, allowed to form who we are and our view of the world, and not necessarily in a healthy way. I mean, some, I guess, could be, but most strongholds are not healthy. We've allowed somebody else or the world to speak into us and tell us who we are, and it's a lie. It's not true about who we are. So, keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. When I was thinking about this concept, the thing that first popped into my mind, because some of these strongholds happen when you're a young child. And I can remember several instances when I was a young child of someone speaking to me, and I took those words into my heart, into who I was. And one in particular I can remember is I was young, probably 8 or 10 years old, and I told my father I wanted to be an astronaut, and I really did want to be an astronaut. And my father told me, there will not be a female astronaut in your lifetime. Now, he was wrong. The first female astronaut is actually older than I am. But I took those words into my heart, and they became one of those strongholds that I was living into, a reality that is actually not truth. And so it takes a lot of figuring out where that came from, and then learning how to take those stones off, because when he spoke that into my life, it built 12 stones. And I have to consciously try and knock those stones down and learn to live in the truth instead of what I believed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you realize a stronghold, a memorial, pretty much the same. I mean, you believe it.
Yeah.
You empower it. And I would suggest to you that most of these strongholds, like I said, you're not aware of. You're not even aware they exist there, and they are directing your life. You believe in them. You live out of them. My cousin Rob was telling me, he's a great teacher and was voted in all of the Houston area #1 speaker for years and years. He's been here and taught us some. He said when he was a young teenager, probably about 13, he was in a movie theater and he wore shorts. And most of us would go, what? Okay. Well, he wore shorts and he stood up and someone in that theater said, look at the sissy wearing the shorts. He's never worn shorts again from that day on. A stronghold that spoke a lot more. When your father said that to you, it had more to do than with just astronauts.
Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it did.
It had to do with women.
Identity, and yes.
Identity. Yeah. I remember, speaking of my trophies, I remember when I was in a national weightlifting championship, doing really well. And I was about to do a bench press, a record bench press, at least for Texas A&M. Woo! Yeah, okay. I held that record for a long time, and until steroids came along. But anyway, and I looked over at my dad, who had come all the way to wherever we were. We weren't in Texas. I actually traveled to go to that meet. And my dad had his face in a Louis L'Amour book.
No way.
Yes. All the way through the lift. Had no idea it was me even lifting. Let me tell you, that built a stronghold. That particular stronghold was already there. But it just affirmed it. And we live our lives going over, remembering, telling those stories over and over again. And we believe them, and they affect what Galatians 5 says, where Christ wants us to have joy, peace, happiness, knowledge, the fruit of the Spirit, and it robs us of those wonderful things. So young people especially, those things are being formed now. And when you hear something that just doesn't quite fit, I remember my dad's favorite saying to me was, you're never going to amount to anything. And I listened to it and I believed it, but I amounted to something, and
yes, you did.
He still had his face in the Louis L'Amour. I love my dad, I love him, but he didn't do it intentionally, but we believe that stuff, you see. It's very, very powerful. So what we want to do is dismantle some of those strongholds. And that takes us to this great memorial. It's not called a sacrament in Scripture. It's called technically an ordinance. We are to do this on a regular basis. In fact, we're instructed, and our founder John Wesley would say, every time we gather.
Yes.
I have been in churches where I've never been in one where we did the Hope Communion service every time we met in the big service, but we would always have it in a chapel every Sunday. I've been in several where we did that. Now, don't get on that. I got enough changes to deal with right now.
Right.
But we should. And if we don't do it that way, we should do it some way. And what you're doing when you come to this place, and by the way, Lawrence preached on a scripture that gave us details of this, and it was weird. I had it in mind too. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 through 32. You ought to read that sometime. But he talks about one of the main things. He says, don't be coming up to this altar, taking the sacrament, and kneeling and doing your thing right there. That's not what... While you're there, out there, preparing to take this sacrament, and what the actual term is self-examination. Self-examination. Look at your life. Don't sit there and put yourself down for this or that or rebuild all those strongholds, but rather examine what you're believing out of, what you're giving, empowering in your heart and your mind. Y'all remember when we were focused so much on the Scripture, and still are, Romans 12:2, be transformed by the what? The renewing of your mind, by the renewing of your heart. Examine those strongholds. And when you come to this place, listen to this truth, this memorial that overrides all those. Oh, I've sinned and my daddy says I'm worthless, never going to amount to anything. Oh, that's not what that says, right? And you take that stronghold down. You march around it until those walls fall. And you live into the memorial. You remember. You put back together again. You say, I've done this or that, God's never going to forgive me. That is not true. This says that God forgives anyone who is called according to His purpose. Anyone who loves and believes Him. You see what we're saying? I don't need to preach anymore on this, do I? Good. Yeah. Y'all want me to shut up. Get on with it. But that's what this is about. When Jesus called those 12 disciples together, He let one go, but did He hate him? Did He condemn him? No. He said, go do what you must do, and do it quickly. He had washed His feet before that. You know, He loved even Judas. And what are they talking about? They're sitting there around the table going, I wonder which one of us is greatest. That's a stronghold. They grew up thinking one more powerful than the other. That is not what that says, right? We are all sinners at the foot of the cross, right? We're all on common ground when we come to this place. They were sitting there thinking, I wonder if I've done something horrible and Jesus isn't going to accept me. And they didn't even understand while it was happening. It was happening to them. It was happening around them. And it was a memorial that says, remember me. Remember. It's not about you. My body, my blood shed, so that you can have life. Yes. Remember. Put it back together. Make it your memorial. And knock down all those strongholds. That's what this is about. So as we're preparing to come, examine yourselves. Would those who are going to assist, please come forward.